to Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.com. I'm your host, Connie Whitman. As always, I'm so joyful that you're here today. Now, as you listen to the show, of course, I know you feel my passion. You can't help but feel my passion that change is hard, and I get it. Change isn't always hard if we choose it, but when change is thrust upon us, sometimes it can be a little difficult to navigate. To help you on your journey of change, I have a free gift, my communication style assessment. The link is in the show notes, so please help yourself. You'll get 2 reports after taking the assessment. The first one will spotlight your natural communication superpowers. It's just how your messages are being received when you speak with other humans. On the flip side, you will also get your lowest score, which is typically our blind spot or the people that communicate 180 degrees different than us. To me, that's probably the more important report, because how is your message being received to those that don't communicate like you? So again, that link is in the show notes. Please help yourself. And again, I hope it helps you on your journey of change. Now, to set the tone, today's very cool quote. So to set the tone for today's show, the quote is by Ayn Rand. And Ayn says, the question isn't who's going to let me, it's who is going to stop me. So as I reflected on today's quote, I really started thinking about my first job after college and how I actually quickly outgrew the organization. And I wanted to apply for a sales position that had opened and was told that the company would not allow the regional manager to promote me because it was a man's job. True story. And I've shared that story in detail on other platforms, so I'm sure many of you have heard it. But here's the important question. So what did I actually do after that? Well, I left to pursue, and I shifted into sales because I realized through that job that I had a natural ability that I didn't even know existed. So I left that steady paycheck and I went into a full commission job. And that to me was the path to sales, because I felt it would allow me to create the future that I desired or that I was seeking, and was not told by someone that I was limited in becoming my best self. So of course, this is an important topic for the ladies out there, but even for my dudes that have daughters and wives, I think you should all tune in and really listen to the messaging today. So my guest is Stacy Mayer, and Stacy and I are going to dig in and really discuss women in leadership roles and how we can navigate by standing in our feminine power. Now, Stacy is the best-selling author of Promotions Made Easy. It's a step-by-step guide to the executive suite, a certified executive coach and promotion strategy, a mother and wife living in Silicon Valley, California, and the creator of Executive Ahead of Time. This is a lifetime access group coaching program she founded to help corporate women get promoted to the executive suite on their terms. Now, she is the host also of a podcast called Women Changing Leadership, where she tackles topics like executive presence, getting more respect in the workplace from challenging bosses and team members, and avoiding the common mistakes that sabotage career advancement. So please help me welcome Stacy to the show. Thanks for being on, kiddo.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh my God. I loved all of those stories. My brain was on fire as you were talking. I'm so excited about this conversation.
And I do want to make a footnote. It's very hard at the intro. I want to be brief because I want to get to the conversation. I will tell you, the regional manager who had to deliver that bad news to me, he had a young daughter. She was about 14. And he said to me, he saw a lot of me and her. And so he said to me, you need to leave here. You've outgrown the organization. So it's interesting because I was, 20 something, like, what did I know? But he really saw something in me, Stacy, that I probably didn't even realize was there. And he's the one who said, you really need to get out of here and look for a job. And he allowed me to interview during the day, and he helped me with my resume. So he actually was very kind because he saw how ridiculous, but this was the organization. You can't change what you can't change. But he really encouraged me to move on, which I will never forget. And I hope his daughter is doing extremely well as well, because I felt he paid it forward with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because I think when you gave that feedback in this conversation, I was like, well, wow, How great for you to have had honest feedback. And, some of what we might talk about today is how our leaders and the people that we're asking for advice and getting feedback from actually don't even know how to take care of themselves. And so they're giving us these really mixed messages and offering advice to us that is not going to help us, that is not going to, put us on that right path. And so the fact that he was able to stay with you straight up, like, look, you do not want to be here. And then in retrospect, you were like, oh my gosh, I didn't, right? That would have been a long, painful road for me, and it might not have ended successfully. So I appreciate him for that too. I'm glad you said that.
Yes, it's a good ending to the story, right?
Yeah.
It's funny when I share it now, Stacy, when I train my clients, right? I go in and I teach their employees how to sell. Really, it's how to communicate more effectively. And so, you have a lot of young people coming in now that graduating college, they're getting hired, right? And I share those stories and they're horrified. I go, look, this is the way it was in the 80s. Things have changed, but how much? That's really up to you. It's your career, it's your journey. Like you have to own it. No one's going to do it for you, right? So things
100%.
have changed and hopefully gotten better, but we still have to control our life, right? To whatever that means, right? Whatever that means.
Totally.
Listen. So let's start, but share your background, Stacy, and your journey to becoming the executive coach for women that you're now doing.
Awesome. Well, I worked at a hedge fund in New York City for about 10 years, and that's where I saw some of the most dynamic women I had ever met in my life. This was a smaller hedge fund. It was definitely run by a bunch of men, but they had the ability to see 2 or 3 powerful women and put them at the top. And those are the women that I focused my attention on and was like, wow, this is somebody that I want to be like someday or surround myself with. And when I came out to Silicon Valley, I actually transferred out here with the hedge fund. I wanted to get into executive coaching and really work with the women like the ones that I was seeing at the hedge fund. And so I started working at a women's leadership organization as a coach and a facilitator for their programs. And I had a little bit of a problem with the outcomes that we were receiving. So the women were coming into the program incredibly capable and powerful. And this is not a fault of the program. It's a fault of, I really blame it a little bit more on women's leadership in general. This is also the time of lean in, and really we have to put ourselves out there more. We have to speak up. Like we're the problem. Like if we just go for it, take big risks and things like that. And what I was noticing is that these women who were coming into this program were already doing that. Right. These were the most outspoken women I had ever seen in my life. I was like, these are, and I call my clients corporate badasses. They were corporate badasses on day one. There was nothing wrong with them. And then I would be like, oh my God, surely you're an SVP or, killing it in the C-suite. And they're like senior managers at most, getting paid half of what their colleagues are getting paid. And so when I decided to branch out on my own, I went all in on getting women promoted and getting women higher salaries. And I was just like going to focus on that, double down on that. And within 6 months of starting my own business, I just had one-on-one clients at the time. I got 3 women promoted to the C-suite. And these 3 women were all skip level promotions. They were not already SVPs totally lined up to go right in there. They were skip level promotions. And there were some certain skills that, like you talk about communication, you change it, results happen fast.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what happened. I shifted their communication and then they took their corporate badassness and got paid.
Here's the thing I've learned, Stace. Communication absolutely is critical. That's why I created this communication style assessment with a colleague of mine and a friend. Because people, you say communicate better and they go, I'm going to communicate better. How do you do it? So when you give someone a tool and you kind of shine a light on what our natural superpowers are, but more importantly, those blind spots, now I have a tool to say, I have to work on XYZ for myself. And the other thing I've learned, in 40 years in sales, and I was financial sales. So it was a male dominated industry. When I started in insurance 40 years ago, it was 43 men and me. And they would say things to me like, because I was really good on the phone, I think because I had a woman's voice and insurance back then, there weren't a lot of female agents. So people responded really nicely to me. I think also I'm friendly, so that came through. But I would get appointments and they'd go, so what are you doing? Going out with your friends? Like they were so condescending. I'm like, no, I just made three appointments. Did you make 3 appointments? Like I was never disrespectful, but I wouldn't let them be punitive with me either. And it's interesting because, do you say it's innate? Perhaps, but I was raised also to respect myself and respect others at the highest level, but not to allow anyone to put me down or talk down to me. Like my parents, my husband, my kids don't talk to me that way. Why would I let a stranger, put me in that position? So I think there was an element of learned behavior. And then, my mastery of communication was just because of my career. So I think what the women that you're describing, I totally get it. There has to be an element of respect, though, not like I am woman, hear me roar, right? There has to be this element of, hey, how can we collaborate, partner together? And let me tell you what my zone of genius is, right? I don't tell me what you think, but that's just based on what you said. That's kind of the vibe I get.
Yeah, totally. So when I doubled down on getting women promoted in titles, the first thing that came up for me was, oh, women don't want this. And what I mean by that is, and, as a business owner, as someone in sales, what I mean by that is by itself, getting women promoted is not a great product. And why is that? Because women are very smart. They don't want to just be promoted, just like you did not want to actually be promoted in that man's world. Like if you were going to have to put up with that, just as described to you, you don't really want that. You didn't want that. You actually didn't want that. Right. And so I couldn't just focus on getting them promoted because you know what? We're smart in 2 ways. One is we can get promoted if we want to get promoted, and we can also not get promoted because we don't want to put up with that crap. And so how do we get promoted is the biggest part of the process. So when you say we don't just go in there and, speak our mind and put everybody else down and be like, I am woman, hear me roar. That is such a huge part of the process. And so I get women promoted on their terms. I am more committed to getting them that voice at the table, right? We can get more women on board seats who get shut down, who get pushed aside, who end up quitting, who hate their life. I have no interest in that. So when it comes to that level of communication, we are communicating and advocating as that executive ahead of time. That's the program that I teach. That's the process that I teach, so that we're really showing up as who we are in that powerful self, that authentically powerful self in every conversation, so that when we make the ask, which is just like, hey, can we talk about my title? Can we level set my salary? They know who we are. And we also know what we're asking for when we're stepping into that next level, that we're going to have allies, that we're going to be included in the conversation, that this is a job that we even want to be in. So that's how we start to bring our whole self to the leadership table. And when we communicate that, it becomes this way of life. It becomes this way of who we are. Like we have lots of sales leaders in my programs, and a lot of them, there isn't a separation. It's not like they turn on their sales hat. They love sales. Like, the difference, right? But when you have a salesperson that's just like turns it on and then it's a fake persona. No, when these women are selling, they're selling something they really care about. They're really passionate about, and they're doing the same thing for their careers.
It's so funny that you said that because it's in my bones. When I talk to other business owners, you network, right? And we meet, like you and I, let's say we met at a networking event. We're like, oh, let's get on a chat together. There's something here, right? When you and I start chatting, I immediately, for business owners, people in career, I'm like, I just had a thought. You know what you should do? Blah, 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 blah. And they go, oh, I never thought of that. I'm like, I don't know what. It's the divine. I call it the divine download. I can't turn it off. My husband and I, we go somewhere and the customer service is exceptional. I'm like, wow, we're coming back here. If the customer service, because right, I teach customer service too. When I go and it's really bad, I'm like, they should be doing this. I should talk to the manager. He goes, do you ever turn it off? I don't know how to turn it off because it's literally right from wrong for me, right? It's kind of right from wrong, and it is what it is, and it's in my bones. So I see it with such clarity because it's not like I have to think about it. It's a part of my being. And again, that's 40 years doing this. So I totally get what you're saying when it's not turning it on. It's like, it's you, it's these women, it's their passion, it's their DNA, right? It becomes part of our DNA.
Yeah. And, I just want to add this capper, so I'll get a lot of more introverted clients that would not say that that was part of who they were, right? Like they would be like, that is not actually, it's not who I am to speak up this way. It's not who I am to take these risks. But then I start to show them it actually is. You know what? Here's a secret. You're a corporate badass. And they're like, I kind of am, right? And we start to pull that out. And the other byproduct of the work that I'm doing is they're losing weight. Their marriages are getting better. Their relationship with their children is better. Why is that? Because they're stepping into who they always were, whatever version that might be. So I just wanted to add that because, it becomes, in some people it's this innate, it's easier to tap into. In other people, it's a learned skill. And really it's both. And, but that balance, it doesn't become work-life balance. Like I have to turn it on, turn it off. It becomes who you are. You are an executive, right? In that sense of like, what does executive, mean, right? How am I showing up for my family, for my partner, for everybody in my life, and making those decisions for all of those pieces? So I get very excited about that.
It clearly, and here's the thing too, Stace, what you just said is you're meeting people where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we shine light on things, people are, it's already there.
Yeah.
It's a blind spot. And here's the thing. We have blind spots. We don't know they're there because they're blind spots.
Exactly.
So we need someone like you to shine a light and say, well, wait a minute, but you're already doing it. I am. And then I am. So you meet people where they are. And again, shine the light, which I think is powerful. Here's the deal, right? In ITs, when, business, like even my own business, people are like, oh, why didn't you do that for yourself? I go, I can't do it for myself. I have 2 coaches because I have blind spots too. I don't know what I don't know. So the shoemaker really doesn't have shoes because they're too busy helping others. And that's why shining the light on our executive presence, or it's there. We just sometimes need to, like you said, develop it. Talk to me a minute about executive presence. Define that for everybody. Like, what does it mean? And how does it show up, if you will?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go back to the story where that you shared at the beginning, where your leader gave you very specific and direct feedback. Mm-hmm. The specific and direct feedback that we're often given as women, and I use the word woman because I have asked a lot of men if they're told they need to work on their executive presence, and the answer is no. Oh. And if I ask women if they're told they need to work on the executive presence across the board, the answer is at some point, always yes, right? And so there is a gender bias in that, and I'll tell you exactly what the men are being told. Often they're being told more specifically what they need to work on. So it falls under the category of what I consider to be executive presence, but it's under this category. So they're being told that, you know what, when you communicate and present to the board, it's terrible, right? Like you need to work on your executive communication. Right? That falls under executive presence, but it's specific. A lot of women are not given very specific feedback. Sometimes it's because the man feels very uncomfortable with the woman and doesn't want to tell her, what he really thinks about her presentation skills. And sometimes it's because they just don't know themselves. So a great example of this is my book, Promotions Made Easy. It really is Promotions Made Easy. I am breaking down this process of getting that level of executive presence, advocating for yourself, making it to that next level. And in that book, I really define for women what executive presence really means, and giving them that, it could mean your presentation skills are off. It could also mean these other things. And so the best example of this is a woman at my children's school is a chief operating officer at her organization. And of course we talk about the work that I do, and she got my book, but this was the compliment that I received. She said, "Oh my God, Stacy, I read your book and I gave it to my VP." So I have a woman on my team who has been asking for a promotion for a long time, and I haven't been able to tell her what she was doing wrong. Like that thing, like she just wasn't ready. And I just kept telling her, you're not ready. Like I can't promote you. You have to do something. And then of course my friend is busy, right? So she's not doing this on purpose, but I could see her as being somebody who would just say, work on your executive presence. Like, I don't know. I can't tell you, just fix it. Right. And so she said, I gave this book to my employee. And that it to me is, so I didn't actually answer your question about executive presence, but it's really my mission. And it paints such a big picture of the vision that I have, that we can tell other women that practical advice, right?
That's right.
Do this.
Yes.
This is executive presence. This is what you need to do differently. And it can change. It can change everything for you. You can start, your eyes can be open, your blind spots, all of the things can just become so clear. So I'm happy to break down some specifics and offer up, even some takeaways for your audience. Like you could do this week, but really I think it's very important for us to understand where the term executive presence comes from, and also how pervasive it is in our society as being another way to, exclude women from the conversation. Like, even if we don't mean to, right? But it's part of the perpetuation of what it is that we don't want, our culture. Yeah, exactly.
Culture's been around forever, right? Since the Industrial Revolution, it is what it is. So, we can make strides to respectfully change it, right? I think it's important. It was funny as you were sharing that we don't give practical, do this, do this, do this. I remember I was coaching with one of my clients, happens to be a call center, and the manager was coaching the supervisor, and both very intelligent women. And I don't say a word. They say, I just let them do their thing. And I observe so I could truly see what's going on when I'm not there, because otherwise, how can I help them? But anyway, at the end, they agreed that she had to get organized. Her desk was an epic mess. It was ridiculous. And they were moving to the headquarters where the CEO would pop in to see them. They were off site. So at the end, I just say to both of them, so we're going to get organized. Yes. They were so excited. We're going to get organized. So I say to the employee, the supervisor, I said, how are you going to do it? Silence. Looked at me, looked at the manager, looked at me, looked at the manager, gives me the shoulders. Like, I don't know. So I look at the manager and I said, well, okay, let's talk. How can you help her get organized? Manager looks at me, looks at the employee, looks at me, looks at the employee. She goes, I don't know. I said, then let's come up with a plan. So that's what we're talking about. It's great to give advice, but if you or the other person has no idea what that next step is, the next month, they would have said, did you get organized? No, I didn't have time. I don't know what to do. Yeah, I don't know either. This conversation would have gone on probably for years. So fast forward, I said to her, I was going back to this offsite location the next day. And I said, look, if you're willing to come in a half hour earlier, so will I. I'll meet you at 8:30. I'll bring baskets and other things, and I'm going to show you how to organize it. I'm going to give you tasks to do. And at the end of the week, when I leave, you will be locked and loaded and ready to go. We're going to take pictures so that when they move, because they were moving a month later, it says, when you move, now, how do you duplicate? We're going to take pictures on your phone, and then you just have to duplicate. Oh, this is great. So then when they moved to headquarters, I was in headquarters training all the time. So they would laugh because I would go down and say hi to the gang during lunch, because I love people. And I would run down and they'd go, Connie's here, Connie's here. I'd walk over, she'd open her drawers because she had garbage in her drawers. And I said, when I come, I'm going to look at those drawers too. So she used to be excited when I would come because she wanted to show me, look, Connie, I'm maintaining it. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're talking about. It's great to give advice, get organized. How do you do it? And that's where you come in with executive presence. Get executive presence. You have to grow. I don't know how to tell you to do it, but you got to grow. Right. That was just a tangible example, I think, of what you were saying. Was that
so good? Yeah, that's exactly it. And I was just thinking how lucky these two women were to have you as that example, right? Even just to learn from the piece, which is, you can't just tell somebody to do something. You have to actually show them and help them across that finish line. And so that was such a great gift.
Yeah. Telling and showing, two very, two very different things. Tell me, why should we not wait for our next performance review? Like, right, we think to ourselves, the next performance review I'm going to ask for. What should we really be doing instead?
Well, in terms of negotiation, just negotiation principles in general, when let's say you're at the final negotiation in court or in, for what a financial negotiation, anything that feels like hardcore, that moment, that actual negotiation where you're sitting across from the table from somebody and saying, okay, I'm going to give you this for this, and then you're going to give me this for this, is the hardest part of the process.
Yeah.
It is the hardest day. It is the day that you have anxiety about. It is the day you feel uncomfortable. It is the day you have to show up powerfully. It is the day you have to do all the things. So we're working our job, and we have this performance review that happens every November 1st. And we wait until November 1st to negotiate for whatever that might be. So first of all, the first thing I want you to know is that it is the hardest day to negotiate on negotiation day. So stop it, right? Mm-hmm. That's the first thing. It's just like, be willing to say, why are we making our lives so difficult? The other reason not to wait for your performance review to advocate for your promotion is because it's already been decided on November 1st. So the other thing about performance reviews and promotion cycles is that it's not actually a negotiation at that point. So we think it is. So we wait for that day and we think this is negotiation day. Unfortunately, it's not. It's actually day where boss tells you what boss is going to give you. It's not negotiation day. It's past. Right? It's past. It happened a couple months before that, right? And so what we have to do is really break both of those things, those cycles. So don't wait until the hardest day. And then also don't think of it as a negotiation itself, because it's not. It's really a one-way conversation. They're telling you what they've already decided. That's right. So when we know that, then we advocate for our promotion year round. It also goes back to this idea of bringing our whole self to the leadership table. When we're having those conversations all the time about our ambition or what's it going to take to get promoted 6 months before we're even eligible to be promoted, then we know, do we even want it? Who are the allies that we're going to have to put in place before we get there, right? We're not in that position of just going for the title and it's all about the title or the money at that time. And we're willing to have them tell us that we're not ready so that we can start to practice in a different way, so we can start to communicate in a different way so that we can actually grow in those 6 months. And then if at the end of the 6 months come November 1st, and let's say we've had a really clear conversation about what it needed to happen and not just one way, like we're doing the work and not telling them, that's Absolutely. Like one way. But let's say it feels really, really good. And come November 1st and they tell us, you know what? You're not going to be promoted. Oh, now you have information. So you get the promotion. Great. Fantastic. But if you do the work ahead of time and you don't get promoted, that might not be the place for you. Or you can decide if that's the right place for you if you want to wait another year. If you don't do the work, if you don't have the conversations, if you just wait until November 1st, you have no information. You don't know what you did or didn't do or could have done better. You're just stuck. And then you have to decide if you're going to stay for another year and who knows, and break the cycle and all the things. So there's so many reasons to advocate year round, but that lays out a few of them.
It's, and this is great advice though. And I think that we think, oh yeah, that'll be the time that I could go back and say, look at all the things I did. But that might be great, but it might not be what's needed to get you to that next level. It might be a whole different set of skill sets. So we're focusing on the wrong thing innocently, thinking that we're serving and showing up, but we're not showing up in the way that we need to get to that next level. And see, it's this clarity of communication, Stacy, and I see this all the time. And that's one of my passions is we really have to communicate with more clarity in our emails, in, our conversations, our body languages are speaking volumes. All of these pieces of the puzzle have to be synced and working. But you have to know how to do it, right? You have to know how to execute these skills, but you have to know what skills to execute or grow or learn or read about or whatever it is, Otherwise, we're doing, and I'm doing, my hands are, for those listening on Apple Podcasts and not on YouTube, but the hands are not meeting. They're going like over each other, right? So it's this miss of communication instead of being on the same page. And it's dangerous because we think, well, I'm busy, I could do it tomorrow. I'm busy, I could do it tomorrow. And then November 1st is here, and we didn't do any of the planning that we could have done because we are busy. So it's prioritizing. I think there's a lot of moving parts to this, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
We're almost out of time. You want to give a couple of quick tips. So anybody listening that sits here and says, oh, Yvette, this is such good information. I need to work on my executive presence, or I need to work on my communication skills, or what's a good start place? Obviously, buy the book. Okay, so let's go with that. But even aside from that, listening, are there any tips you can give that people could start to put into practice?
Yeah. So let me give you another quick definition of executive presence, and then I'm going to focus in on like what you can do this week.
Cool.
So executive presence, I see in 3 parts. It's how we see ourselves, how other people see us, and how you see other people. So how we see ourselves, just really quick definition, that involves like, do you have the persona of executive leadership? Do you believe that you're capable, right? Are you able to make those fast decisions? Do you even want to be in the executive suite? Like whatever that might be. And then the third piece, how you see other people. Do you see your CEO, your C-suite executives as these like amazing, untouchable people who are way up here and nothing like you? Or do they feel kind of like peers? No matter like your title, are you one-to-one? Do you have those allies? Have you built relationships with them? Those are equal parts of executive presence. 30, 30, 30, right? Like it's equal parts of executive presence. The part that we spend the most time on, and that's actually where I'm going to give you the practical tip, is the middle part, which is how other people see us. That's why a lot of times executive presence is defined as be more like a man. Be more like everybody else in the room. Because if you can be, how they see you, do they see you as an equal, right? Is your voice low? Do you seem like one of the guys? Can you, it's like, are you loud? Are you this, right? Like whatever that might be. That is executive presence. That is how people have defined it for us. And so it's this outside in. And so the reason why I give the 3-part definition is because it really is equal parts. So we can act more like a man, get ourselves promoted, and hate our lives, right? So that's why I want to say we cannot just focus on the outside in and how other people see us without doing the other work.
That's right.
Now I have an approach that's completely different. Then of course, be more like a man, because I'm not interested in perpetuating, what we already see that's not working. And there's a lot of men that work in executive leadership that are phenomenal. But I think when it comes to the not working part, the part that we don't want to emulate, right? And that's often what holds women back. So there is this middle zone. So I'm going to use your example, which is, that's a man's world, right? You don't really want that. And I'm going to translate that into you're too nice, right? So this is feedback that women have been given consistently. And then the other feedback that women are sometimes given is you're too aggressive. Right. So those are just like 2 sides of actually the same action. Right. So if you want to succeed in executive leadership, you cannot be too nice and you cannot be too aggressive. Right. And I would actually say both are true. That's actually part of executive presence, right? You have to know and read your room. And if you just come in there bulldozing, you are going to be seen as too aggressive, right? And it's not great. It's not a great working environment. They don't want you. If you're too nice, you can't have the tough conversations. It feels like you're being walked all over. You're not going to be an asset to the executive team.
Absolutely.
So how do we get through that? Is we look at it and we say, what is it that they're really asking? Are they asking you to be too nice or too mean? Like, are they really looking at niceness or meanness? Absolutely not. What they're saying is, can you do hard things? That's it. Executive leadership involves doing hard things. Like I just don't think that we get away from that. It's one of the hardest things, right? It is incredibly hard. It's just like you said, change is hard, right? Like when we start to know what we're signing up for, that we might have to lay off half our team, that we might have to lead a project that we blood, sweat, and tears in, and then just gets thrown away, that we might do all the work and then get acquired, like all the things, right? It is hard to work in executive leadership. So what we're going to do, and this is for your listeners this week, is you're going to start to show your work. That's it. You're not going to try and be less nice or less aggressive. I want you to show in conversation, show, not tell, like show. And what I mean by show, not tell is there is an element of telling. You're talking about your process of doing something hard. So let's say you have a teammate and you had to come down on them and hold them accountable for delivering something, right? Well, most of us won't actually tell our boss that we did that. Like, we'll just like be like, yeah, it's just a thing I did. Instead, I want you to have a conversation with your boss and tell your boss something hard that you did this week, something like a difficult conversation that you had with somebody, a decision that you had to make that didn't feel easy. Show your boss that you are capable of doing hard things. That's executive presence.
That's beautiful. And it's really easy to say, gosh, like I would come into you right as my boss and say, hey, Stace, got a minute? So I had this conversation with John, and, he wasn't delivering the reports on time and all of this. And, I know he's learning and everything. I just wanted to share these conversations are tough. I know you must have them all the time too. Conversational, letting her know in this just really, and I bet you face that, or the man faces that too. Not the best day, but I know I did my job, right? It's as simple as those little conversations with guess what I did today? And you're going to be really proud of me. There's a way to.
Yeah.
Done in this very gracious way by just keeping them kind of informed, right?
Yeah, it's so amazing. If you were talking about the difference between YouTube and Apple Podcasts, I have my hands in the air. Go Connie, right? Like she nailed it, right? This is the coach in her, but she, that's it. She just explained it to you, and that's the balance that we're going out and we're trying to create. It's amazing, and it's so easy. We can do it this week.
Right after you listen to this show, especially if you're listening during lunch or you're listening at night while you're washing dishes, the next day, go in, put this on your to-do list, right? This is a good action step. Everyone, clearly you need to buy the book. Stace, one more time. What's the name of the book? I don't want to go back on my notes here.
Promotions Made Easy, a step-by-step guide to the executive suite.
Nice. Also in the show notes is the website, stacymayer.com. If you have a question, please email Stacy, coach@stacymayer.com. And she could just give you some more insight. And the link, I'm assuming the link to the book is also on your website.
Oh yeah. Yeah. All the information.
stacymayer.com. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And of course you have a free gift, stacymayer.com/questions. What is the free gift?
Yeah. So when we're starting to look at that third piece of executive presence, which is how we see other people, I have a process called 15-minute ally meetings. And that puts you in conversation with all the executive team and leaders at your organization. So you can really start to understand what matters to them, be able to communicate what you're working on. And in this process, you have to know what kind of questions to ask in these conversations. So I have a free download that lists 20 questions. These are asking better questions guide that you can start to ask this week in those 15-minute ally meetings, and really getting to know the executive team so that you can actually start to see them as that peer, as that equal, as somebody that you even want to work with on the leadership team.
That's beautiful. Very important. That last statement is very important. Make sure you want to do this. It's not about the title and the money. Do you want to do this, or is it going to be soul sucking? So I really think that's the first step. Thank you. That is such a useful tool. So 2 tips: have the hard conversation, and in a gracious way, let your boss know what you did. Okay. Show, not tell, or a combination. And the second one, use these questions, start to make them part of your repertoire, if you will, so that when you are in front of them, they're part of your communication skills. So you know which questions to pull depending on the situation or who you're speaking with. So 2 very tangible tools. Stace, remarkable, great description of executive presence. and then great resources and tools that you shared. I so appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for being on. Great show. Really, really appreciate this.
Thank you, Connie.
Truly a joy. And I hope you will join me weekly as we question, build, and discover together, no matter what change you're facing, whether it's personal or professional. Between my guests and I, we've got you. And truly, truly, I hope that our conversation today, that you can take some of these action steps and put them into practice immediately. Information's a beautiful thing. If we do nothing with it, it's information. When you put it into that action, watch the reaction and the magic that starts happening in your life, again, both personally and professionally. Stacy, thank you again. Thank you for joining me on Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.com. I'm your host, Connie Whitman. As always, I am honored to have you on this journey of change with me. And I truly wish you an inspired week where you choose something different that will impact your life long term. Remember, we're playing the long game. It's not about the transaction. It's about building the life we desire. Enjoy, have a great one, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.